Story 1. Does anyone know the actual story of King Shaka Zulu? He was literally that guy. Shaka was born as an illegitimate son of a Zulu and was thus rejected by the Zulu settlements. He spent his childhood growing up in his mother's settlements and was then lent an army, which he used to take over the Zulu tribe. Hugh, one of the greatest but most intense African warriors and monarchs of all time. Story 2. I knew a girl a few years back who I think is a decent example of this. She was diagnosed with attention deficit back in primary school and was shunned by her whole family because of it. As a result, she had low self-esteem and slowly grew a profound hatred for people, which resulted in everyone at school hating her, and as a result, her hatred grew more. After her 17th birthday, she ran away, but before she did, she had spent about 5 years gathering dirt on everyone who wronged her. She released it all, which resulted in her parents splitting and a bunch of other kids being expelled or getting into trouble with their parents. And if memory serves me correctly, one kid even got disowned because of what everyone found out about him. She ended up running to a family friend of mine and is still working on rebuilding her life. It's a shame because she is one of the nicest people I know and is a very honest person. Everyone just treated her poorly, so she burned it all. Story 3. I don't know if this is the right interpretation, but it is quite literal. I had a friend in elementary school who was neglected by his mom and beaten by his dad. One day at school, he told me he was going to get revenge, and I didn't really think of it. The next morning on the news, we saw a report on a child who had caused a gas explosion by pouring gas on his parents while they were sleeping and throwing a match on them. He lost his right leg and had burns all over his lower body, and he killed both of his parents. He never went back to public school until the 6th grade when he finally showed up. I asked him where he had been, and he said the hospital and then juvenile detention. Too long, didn't read. Child gets abused, so he blows up his parents. Story 4. A kid went to school. He was in special behavioral classes and then was put into our class in 4th grade. My teacher was hard on him. One day, the kid had a tantrum and threw a chair. He was sent back to the special classes, which probably destroyed him. He continued on and in high school was one of the freaks. Always wore a trench coat in Texas, mind you, and was into nerdy things. I talked to him sometimes, but wouldn't really call him a friend. More just nice to him. He would be reading a Dungeons and Dragons book, and we'd chat about that since my uncle got me into role-playing games. In 11th grade, the school went into lockdown for some unknown reason. I found out he committed suicide in one of the school bathrooms. I heard he wrote letters to faculty and friends prior to doing it. Story 5. I work with kids who have mental health issues. Many of them have attempted suicide, run away, self-harm, or have an addiction of some kind by their mid-teens. They always have some kind of traumatic family life that's pushed them to that problem. One thing we see again and again is the poor kid who comes in after the parent or guardian has belittled them and told them what a piece of garbage they are for years. Eventually, the kid starts acting out, which the adult uses as proof that they were right all along about the kid being an awful person. One kid I worked with was in and out of treatment programs for a couple of years and had exactly this kind of parents. The father was always on the road driving a truck and checked out when he was at home. The mother was personality disordered and extremely emotionally and verbally abusive. One day, while his father was on the road, this boy murdered his mother by bludgeoning her to death with a hammer while she slept. Then he kept her body in the house for a few days, abusing the corpse before stuffing her remains into the trash can and leaving them on the curbside for pickup. Story 6. I once attended a birthday party with a bouncy castle. The birthday kid and their friends kicked the younger sibling and his friend out, so they unplugged it and watched everyone's dismay as it deflated. Way to go, Mason. Bold moves for a 12-year-old. Story 7. I worked at an ice cream shop. I won't name which one, but all I'll say is they may have slightly more than 30 flavors. Anyway, my boss was a conservative Mormon who lashed out at me anytime a piercing or tattoo was showing. The manager and boss would sit in the back and make lists of physically exerting tasks for me to do while maybe one of them spent an hour frosting a single cake. Legally, if you work 6 hours, you get a lunch break, but my boss would routinely make me work on lunches. At the time, there were maybe 5 employees, and we were all overworked and begging our boss to hire new people. I am a generally easygoing person. I'm usually chipper, hyper, and super happy, especially towards customers. It's just my personality that I want to help people and make them smile. I really got along with my coworkers, constantly cracking jokes with them and dancing. I always got closing duties done early and made sure every task was crossed off. Over time, I noticed my paychecks weren't what they were supposed to be by almost $2 an hour. Minimum wage had gone up and I was a shift lead, so I got a dollar bonus, but I went through my checks and realized the math didn't add up and I had been cheated out of almost $3,000 from the time I started working until it was brought to my attention. I asked my boss about it, and she said because I didn't have the dollar bonus handwritten from her, it didn't exist. And she asked me to apologize to her for accusing her of cheating me out of money. 2 weeks later, I came into work, and she handed me my last paycheck and wouldn't say why I was being let go. When the other workers found out I had been fired, 3 of the 4 employees quit that day, with the 4th being the manager that constantly harassed me and the younger girls. The others had been there less than 4 months and weren't very experienced. They were already overworked and stressed. I felt like I brought a certain kind of calmness to the chaos when it got busy, and I think I made working fun for myself and my coworkers because I knew how much it sucked being there, and I wanted to make the most of it with them. When they left, they said my boss cried. Immediately after, California was put on lockdown, and she wasn't able to hire new people because no one was applying. Long story short, she had to close and has been closed since March 26th. I was let go March 24th. I drive past every day on my way home, and they still aren't open. It's unfortunate, but I don't feel bad. Story 8. I used to be into amateur radio after a short stint in the Army Cadets. There was one guy in the East Midlands, UK, who was one of the adult instructors. He was always telling us about amateur radio and would hand out old, cheaper pieces of technology he'd tried out and wasn't keeping. Anyway, he was a little weird, overly friendly with adults, never had any bad vibes around the kids, and obviously had some social anxiety which he was compensating for. Personally, I suspect he was on the autistic spectrum, but who knows? After I left the cadets and went to university, I stayed in touch on Facebook. We were in the same Facebook group for amateur radio hobbyists. He always liked to do things by the book and instilled in us the importance of being responsible and socially conscious with our radio use. He was the same on Facebook, reminding people that Mrs. Miggins on her 10-pound handset wouldn't know about transmission power and squelch, etc. He mentioned in passing to a new member the importance of only using the public unlicensed channels, kind of like Citizens Band Radio in the United States, on the correct, very low power setting of 0.5 watt. He mentioned it was because Mrs. Miggins trying to reach her kid in the next street wouldn't understand the idea that she could hear you but couldn't reach you to ask you to be quiet a minute. He was correct here, and it's also a criminal offense to transmit at higher power on these frequencies, even though it's not enforced. Anyway, this got someone's back up, and he was kicked from the group for preaching. After unsuccessfully asking to be let back in, he set up a larger antenna in his back garden, set up a super fancy aerial atop it with a 30-watt transmission system. This is really quite powerful. He now turns this on for several hours a day on whatever channels the radio club or group are using to teach them the importance of good etiquette. This means that nobody can use certain frequencies for hours at a time, as it just sounds like someone is having a one-way conversation on air. He could probably get arrested, but that doesn't seem to bother him at all. Story 9. I worked at a very famous family-oriented company for almost 15 years. I was damn good at my job but refused to brown nose or play dirty office politics, so I stayed pretty much in my original spot for a long time. Because of this, I became a regularly used advice platform for other employees on how to handle workplace issues. Because I valued my integrity, I never reported red flags to management but always encouraged the person to do so on their own behalf. Eventually, a few key people remembered how I helped them and circumvented the usual cronyism to bring me into their teams for big-name projects. It was a nice change, and I appreciated the chance to stretch. Then, I started getting systematically bullied and harassed by the in-crowd, who had decided I was unworthy of being in their presence. I ended up going to therapy about it to help develop tools to deflect while desperately looking for a way out. Eventually, I got another job and handed a sort of manifesto to human resources when I turned in my 30-day notice. Racism, sexual harassment, assault, blatant favoritism, theft. all with dates, names, and supporting evidence. Basically, a human resources nightmare because they couldn't control what I did when I left, including going to the press. My departure gave them 30 days to ask me questions, interview me, whatever, but it never came. The thing is, I also sent that novel off to the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. They opened an investigation with the company, and the moment they did, all hell broke loose. See, the people who were too afraid to come forward before now had an out. They weren't snitching. They were complying with an investigation per company policy. So suddenly, scores of people were testifying to human resources about the horrific things they had been subjected to. Some people were fired, others demoted. A few got off scot-free. But I sleep like a baby now. Just to clarify, I went to each and every person whose story I included to make sure they were comfortable and understood what might follow. Most agreed, some did not, and I excluded them entirely from my manifesto. My only regret is that there were people whose struggles even I didn't know about, and I was unable to amplify their voices. Thank you all for your support. Speak out, speak up, speak together. The voices of many are harder to silence than the voice of one. Story 10. I'm a behavioral interventionist at a middle school. My job is technically to pull disruptive students out of class, get them redirected, then back into their classroom. Most of my job is actually being a sounding board and an understanding ear to kids who struggle. My entire job is an example of that quote. The neglect and abuse of some of those kids will break your heart. Story 11. I worked in an office for a Fortune 500 company. One of our longtime team members, Grace, worked as a level 2 employee for quite a while. She was good enough to be a level 3 or level 4 employee, but never took the offer because she was a single mom, relied on public transportation, and so on. Her friend, Paula, started at the same time she did and was a level 3 working up to a level 4. Grace and Paula were all good until Paula discovered that Grace made more than her because she was constantly getting merit raises and performance bonuses. One day, Grace made an honest mistake. Our client had just switched to a different protocol for billing, and she accidentally used the old one. It was a no harm, no foul situation, but Paula went to the level 4 employees and senior management and suggested that Grace be fired. They all went to human resources, who said that while there was no valid reason to fire her, they could move her to a worse team that would basically guarantee her failure. Grace realized what was happening and secured another job. We were going to be off for 4 days for Christmas, and Grace quit Thursday by leaving an after-hours voicemail. She knew that the message wouldn't be received until Monday morning, so she sent out an email to the entire building, time to be sent at 11:59 on Christmas Eve. The email detailed how Paula was having an affair with her brother-in-law while her husband was deployed, how one senior manager took this job because he was fired for embezzlement and lost his certified public accountant license, and how one of our male level 3 employees requested a transfer because our married department manager was sexually harassing him. We got in at 8, and human resources and information technology got in at 9. It was chaos Monday morning. Quite a few people quit that day, and to think it all could have been avoided. I've run into Grace and Paula since then. Grace is thriving. She got a stern phone call from the company and they tried to withhold her last paycheck. But that was it. Paula is, well, a little more humble now. She was going through some serious issues at the time, and while that doesn't excuse any of her actions, I think the letter was a wake-up call she needed to fix her life. The level 3 employee is doing well. He quit a year later for a better opportunity. I'm not going to say who the company is, but it is not Procter & Gamble. Story 12. I received a call from the police to go to a school. When I arrived, I saw a teacher holding a small kid back, and another kid who looked like he had been severely injured. His arm appeared to be bent backwards, his face was bloodied, and some of his hair had been ripped out. He was on the floor as paramedics took him to the ambulance. I arrested the kid, and during questioning, he said, "I want to be noticed." It haunted me as I sent out a report to conduct a background check on the parents. It turned out the kid was being neglected, and at school, teachers reported that others would push past him and shove him without even noticing him. He was smiling when he said, "People finally looked at me. It's been so long since that." I felt horrible as I passed the case to another person because I couldn't handle it. I'm not sure it applies here, but that's the first thing that came to mind when I saw this. Edit. I speak French and filled out the forms in French. I'm not that good at English. This happened in Quebec, where French is the main language, or at least where I was.